Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 441. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, Allah's apostle came to Medina and the people used to pay in advance the price of fruits to be delivered within 1 or 2 years. The sub-narrator is in doubt whether it was 1 to 2 years or 2 to 3 years. The Prophet said, whoever pays money in advance for dates, to be delivered later, should pay it for known specified weight and measure, of the dates. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 442. Narrated by Ibn Ангիր, as above, mentioning only specific measure. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 443. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, the Prophet came to Medina and the people used to pay in advance the price of dates to be delivered within 2 or 3 years. He said, to them, whoever pays in advance the price of a thing to be delivered later should pay it for a specified measure at specified weight for a specified period. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 444. Narrated by Ibn Ангիր, as above, saying, he should pay the price in advance for a specified measure and for a specified period. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 445. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, the Prophet came to Medina, and he told the people, regarding the payment of money in advance, that they should pay it, for a known specified measure and a known specified weight and a known specified period. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 446. Narrated by Shubi'a, Muhammad or Abdullah bin Abu al-Mujallid said, Abdullah bin Shaddad and Abu Burda differed regarding As-Salam, so they sent me to Ibn Abi Awfa and I asked him about it. He replied, in the lifetime of Allah's apostle, Abu Bakr and Umar, we used to pay in advance the prices of wheat, barley, dried grapes, and dates to be delivered later. I also asked Ibn Abza and he, too, replied as above. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 447. Narrated by Muhammad bin al-Majallid, Abdullah bin Shaddad and Abu Burda sent me to Abdullah bin Abi Awfa and told me to ask Abdullah whether the people in the lifetime of the Prophet used to pay in advance for wheat, to be delivered later. Abdullah replied, we used to pay in advance to the peasants of Sham for wheat, barley, and olive oil of a known specified measure to be delivered in a specified period. I asked him, was the price paid, in advance, to those who had the things to be delivered later? Abdullah bin Awfa replied, we did not use to ask them about that. Then they sent me to Abdurrahman bin Abza and I asked him. He replied, the companions of the Prophet used to practice salam in the lifetime of the Prophet, and we did not use to ask them whether they had standing crops or not. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 448. Narrated by Muhammad bin Abi al-Mujallid, as above, 446, and said, we used to pay them in advance for wheat and barley, to be delivered later. Narrated Ash-Shaybani. And also for oil. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 449. Narrated by Ash-Shaybani, who said we used to pay in advance for wheat, barley and dried grapes. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 450. Narrated by Abu Bakr at-Tai, I asked Ibn Abbas about salam for, the fruits of, date palms. He replied, the Prophet forbade the sale of dates on the trees till they became fit for eating and could be weighed. A man asked what to be weighed, as the dates were still on the trees. Another man sitting beside Ibn Abbas replied, till they are cut and stored. Narrated Abu al-Bakhtari, I heard Ibn Abbas saying, that the Prophet forbade, etc. as above. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 451. Narrated by Abu al-Bakhtari, I asked Ibn Umar about salam, the fruits of, date palms. He replied, the Prophet forbade the sale of dates till their benefit becomes evident and fit for eating, and also the sale of silver, for gold, on credit. I asked Ibn Abbas about Salam for dates, and he replied, the Prophet forbade the sale of dates till they were fit for eating and could be estimated. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 452. Narrated by Abu al-Bakhtari, I asked Ibn Umar about Salam for dates. Ibn Umar replied, the Prophet forbade the sale, the fruits, of date palms until they were fit for eating, and also forbade the sale of silver for gold on credit. I also asked Ibn Abbas about it. Ibn Abbas replied, the Prophet forbade the sale of dates till they were fit for eating, and could be weighed. I asked him, what is to be weighed, as the dates are on the trees? A man sitting by Ibn Abbas said, it means till they are cut and stored. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 453. Narrated by Aisha, Allah's apostle bought some foodstuff, barley, from a Jew on credit and mortgaged his iron armor to him. The armor stands for a guarantor. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 454. Narrated by Al-Amash, we argued at Ibrahim's dwelling place about mortgaging in Salam. He said, Aisha said, the Prophet bought some foodstuff from a Jew on credit, and the payment was to be made by a definite period, and he mortgaged his iron armor to him. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 455. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, the Prophet came to Medina and the people used to pay in advance the prices of fruits to be delivered within 2 to 3 years. The Prophet said, to them, buy fruits by paying their prices in advance on condition that the fruits are to be delivered to you according to a fixed specified measure within a fixed specified period. Ibn Najih said, by specified measure and specified weight. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 456. Narrated by Muhammad bin Abi al-Mujallid, Abu Burda and Abdullah bin Shaddad sent me to Abdurrahman bin Abza and Abdullah bin Abi Awfa to ask them about the sale of Salam. They said, we used to get war booty while we were with Allah's apostle, and when the peasants of Sham came to us we used to pay them in advance for wheat, barley, and oil to be delivered within a fixed period. I asked them, did the peasants own standing crops or not? They replied, we never asked them about it. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 457. Narrated by Abdullah, the people used to sell camels on the basis of Habal al-Hawaala. The Prophet forbade such sale. Nafi explained Habal al-Hawaala by saying, the camel is to be delivered to the buyer after the she-camel gives birth. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 458. Narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah, Allah's apostle gave a verdict regarding shaveh in every undivided joint thing, property. But if the limits are defined, or demarcated, or the ways and streets are fixed, then there is no preemption. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 459. Narrated by Amr bin Ashjarid, while I was standing with Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, Al-Miswar bin Makrama came and put his hand on my shoulder. Meanwhile Abu Rafi, the freed slave of the Prophet, came and asked Sa'd to buy from him the 2 dwellings which were in his house. Sa'd said, by Allah I will not buy them. Al-Miswar said, by Allah, you shall buy them. Sa'd replied, by Allah, I will not pay more than 4,000 dirhams, by installments. Abu Rafi said, I have been offered 500 dinars, for it, and had I not heard the Prophet saying, the neighbor has more right than anyone else because of his nearness, I would not give them to you for 4,000 dirhams, while I am offered 500 dinars, 1 dinar equals 10 dirhams, for them. So, he sold it to Sa'd. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 35, Hadith number 460. Narrated by Aisha, I said, O Allah's Apostle, I have 2 neighbors and would like to know to which of them I should give presents. He replied, to the one whose door is nearer to you. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 461. Narrated by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, the Prophet said, the honest treasurer who gives willingly what he is ordered to give, is one of the 2 charitable persons, the second being the owner. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 462. Narrated by Abu Musa, I went to the Prophet with 2 men from Ash'ari tribe. I said, to the Prophet, I do not know that they want employment. The Prophet said, no, we do not appoint for our jobs anybody who demands it earnestly. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 463. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, Allah did not send any prophet but shepherded sheep. His companions asked him, did you do the same? The Prophet replied, yes, I used to shepherd the sheep of the people of Mecca for some qirats. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 464. Narrated by Aisha, the Prophet and Abu Bakr employed a pagan man from the tribe of Bani Ad-Dail and the tribe of Bani Abu bin Adi as a guide. He was an expert guide and he broke the oath contract which he had to abide by with the tribe of Laci bin Wail, and he was on the religion of Quraysh pagans. The Prophet and Abu Bakr had confidence in him and gave him their riding camels and told him to bring them to the cave of Thor after 3 days. So, he brought them their 2 riding camels after 3 days, and both of them, the Prophet and Abu Bakr, set out accompanied by Amir bin Fuhaira and the Dili guide who guided them below Mecca along the road leading to the seashore. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 465. Narrated by Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, Allah's apostle, and Abu Bakr hired a man from the tribe of Bani Ad-Dil as an expert guide who was a pagan, follower of the religion of the pagans of Quraysh. The Prophet and Abu Bakr gave him their 2 riding camels and took a promise from him to bring their riding camels in the morning of the 3rd day to the cave of Thor. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 466. Narrated by Ya'la bin Umayyah, I fought in Jaysh al-Usra, Ghazwa of Tabuk, along with the Prophet, and in my opinion that was the best of my deeds. Then I had an employee, who quarreled with someone, and one of them bit and cut the other's finger and caused his own tooth to fall out. He then went to the Prophet, with a complaint, but the Prophet cancelled the suit and said to the complainant, did you expect him to let his finger in your mouth so that you might snap and cut it, as does a stallion camel? Narrated Ibn Juray'i from Abdullah bin Abu Malaika from his grandfather a similar story, a man bit the hand of another man and caused his own tooth to fall out, but Abu Bakr judged that he had no right for compensation, for the broken tooth. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 467. Narrated by Ubay bin Ka'b, Allah's apostle said, both of them, Moses and Al-Qadir, proceeded until they reached a wall which was about to fall. Said said, Al-Qadir pointed, with his hands, towards the wall, and then raised his hands and the wall became straightened up. Ya'la said, I think said, he, Qadir, passed his hand over it and it was straightened up. Moses said to him, if you had wanted, you could have taken wages for it. Said, wages with which to buy food. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 468. Narrated by Ibn Umar, the Prophet said, your example and the example of the people of the 2 scriptures, i.e. Jews and Christians, is like the example of a man who employed some laborers and asked them, who will work for me from morning till midday for 1 qirat? The Jews accepted and carried out the work. He then asked, who will work for me from midday up to the Asr prayer for 1 qirat? The Christians accepted and fulfilled the work. He then said, who will work for me from the Asr till sunset for 2 qirats? You, Muslims, have accepted the offer. The Jews and the Christians got angry and said, why should we work more and get lesser wages? Allah said, "Have I withheld part of your right?" They replied in the negative. He said, "It is my blessing, I bestow upon whomever I wish." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 469. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar bin al-Khattab, Allah's apostle said, "Your example and the example of Jews and Christians is like the example of a man who employed some laborers to whom he said, 'Who will work for me up to midday for 1 qirat each?' The Jews carried out the work for 1 qirat each, and then the Christians carried out the work up to the Asr prayer for 1 qirat each, and now you Muslims are working from the Asr prayer up to sunset for 2 qirats each." The Jews and Christians got angry and said, "We work more and are paid less." The employer, Allah, asked them, "Have I usurped some of your right?" They replied in the negative. He said, "That is my blessing, I bestow upon whomever I wish." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 470. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, Allah said, "I will be an opponent to 3 types of people on the day of resurrection. 1. One who makes a covenant in my name, but proves treacherous. 2. One who sells a free person and eats his price. 3. One who employs a laborer and takes full work from him but does not pay him for his labor." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 471. Narrated by Abu Musa, the Prophet said, "The example of Muslims, Jews, and Christians is like the example of a man who employed laborers to work for him from morning till night for specific wages. They worked till midday and then said, 'We do not need your money which you have fixed for us, and let whatever we have done be annulled.' The man said to them, 'Don't quit the work, but complete the rest of it and take your full wages.' But they refused and went away. The man employed another batch after them and said to them, 'Complete the rest of the day and yours will be the wages I had fixed for the first batch.' So, they worked till the time of Asr prayer. Then they said, 'Let what we have done be annulled and keep the wages you have promised us for yourself.' The man said to them, 'Complete the rest of the work, as only a little of the day remains,' but they refused. Thereafter he employed another batch to work for the rest of the day, and they worked for the rest of the day till the sunset, and they received the wages of the 2 former batches. So, that was the example of those people, Muslims, and the example of this light, guidance, which they have accepted willingly." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 472. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, "I heard Allah's apostle saying, 3 men from among those who were before you, set out together till they reached a cave at night and entered it. A big rock rolled down the mountain and closed the mouth of the cave. They said, to each other, 'Nothing could save you from this rock but to invoke Allah by giving referenda to the righteous deed which you have done, for Allah's sake only.' So, one of them said, 'O Allah! I had old parents and I never provided my family, wife, children etc., with milk before them. One day, by chance I was delayed, and I came late, at night, while they had slept. I milked the sheep for them and took the milk to them, but I found them sleeping. I disliked to provide my family with the milk before them. I waited for them and the bowl of milk was in my hand, and I kept on waiting for them to get up till the day dawned. Then they got up and drank the milk. O Allah! If I did that for your sake only, please relieve us from our critical situation caused by this rock.' So, the rock shifted a little but they could not get out. The Prophet added, the second man said, 'O Allah! I had a cousin who was the dearest of all people to me, and I wanted to have sexual relations with her, but she refused. Later she had a hard time in a famine year, and she came to me and I gave her 120 dinars on the condition that she would not resist my desire, and she agreed. When I was about to fulfill my desire, she said, 'It is illegal for you to outrage my chastity except by legitimate marriage.' So, I thought it a sin to have sexual intercourse with her and left her, though she was the dearest of all the people to me, and also I left the gold I had given her. O Allah! If I did that for your sake only, please relieve us from the present calamity. So, the rock shifted a little more, but still they could not get out from there. The Prophet added, then the third man said, O Allah! I employed few laborers and I paid them their wages with the exception of one man who did not take his wages and went away. I invested his wages and I got much property thereby. Then after some time, he came and said to me, O Allah's slave! Pay me my wages. I said to him, all the camels, cows, sheep, and slaves you see, are yours. He said, O Allah's slave! Don't mock at me. I said, I am not mocking at you. So, he took all the herd and drove them away and left nothing. O Allah! If I did that for your sake only, please relieve us from the present suffering. So, that rock shifted completely and they got out walking. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 473. Narrated by Abu Ma'id al-Ansari, whenever Allah's Apostle ordered us to give in charity we would go to the market and work as porters to earn a mud, 2 handfuls, of foodstuff, but now some of us have 100,000 dirhams or dinars. The sub-narrator, Shaykh said, I think Abu Mas'ud meant himself by saying, some of us. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 474. Narrated by Taus, Ibn Abbas said, the Prophet forbade the meeting of caravans, on the way, and ordained that no townsman is permitted to sell things on behalf of a Bedouin. I asked Ibn Abbas, what is the meaning of his saying, no townsman is permitted to sell things on behalf of a Bedouin? He replied, he should not work as a broker for him. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 475. Narrated by Kabab, I was a blacksmith and did some work for Alays bin Wale. When he owed me some money for my work, I went to him to ask for that amount. He said, I will not pay you unless you disbelieve in Muhammad. I said, by Allah! I will never do that till you die and be resurrected. He said, will I be dead and then resurrected after my death? I said, yes. He said, there I will have property and offspring and then I will pay you your due. Then Allah revealed, have you seen him who disbelieved in our signs, and yet says, I will be given property and offspring? 19.77. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 476. Narrated by Abu said, some of the companions of the Prophet went on a journey till they reached some of the Arab tribes, at night. They asked the latter to treat them as their guests but they refused. The chief of that tribe was then bitten by a snake, or stung by a scorpion, and they tried their best to cure him but in vain. Some of them said, to the others, nothing has benefited him, will you go to the people who resided here at night, it may be that some of them might possess something, as treatment. They went to the group of the companions, of the Prophet, and said, our chief has been bitten by a snake, or stung by a scorpion, and we have tried everything but he has not benefited. Have you got anything, useful? One of them replied, yes, by Allah! I can recite a ruqya, but as you have refused to accept us as your guests, I will not recite the ruqya for you unless you fix for us some wages for it. They agrees to pay them a flock of sheep. One of them then went and recited, Suratul Fatiha, all the praises are for the Lord of the worlds, and puffed over the chief who became all right as if he was released from a chain, and got up and started walking, showing no signs of sickness. They paid them what they agreed to pay. Some of them, i.e. the companions, then suggested to divide their earnings among themselves, but the one who performed the recitation said, do not divide them till we go to the Prophet and narrate the whole story to him, and wait for his order. So, they went to Allah's Apostle and narrated the story. Allah's Apostle asked, how did you come to know that Surat al-Fatiha was recited as ruqya? Then he added, you have done the right thing. Divide what you have earned, and assign a share for me as well. The Prophet smiled thereupon. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 477. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, when Abu Tayba cupped the Prophet and the Prophet ordered that he be paid 1 or 2 sas of foodstuff and he interceded with his masters to reduce his taxes. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 478. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, when the Prophet was cupped, he paid the man who cupped him his wages. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 479. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, when the Prophet was cupped, he paid the man who cupped him his wages. If it had been undesirable he would not have paid him. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 480. Narrated by Anas, the Prophet used to get cupped and would never withhold the wages of any person. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 481. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, the Prophet sent for a slave who had the profession of cupping, and he cupped him. The Prophet ordered that he be paid 1 or 2 sas, or 1 or 2 muds of foodstuff, and appealed to his masters to reduce his taxes. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 482. Narrated by Abu Masud al-Ansari, Allah's apostle regarded illegal the price of a dog, the earnings of a prostitute, and the charges taken by a soothsayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 483. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet prohibited the earnings of slave girls, through prostitution. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 484. Narrated by Ibn Umar, the Prophet forbade taking a price for animal copulation. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 36, Hadith number 485. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, Allah's apostle gave the land of Khaybar to the Jews to work on and cultivate and take half of its yield. Ibn Umar added, the land used to be rented for a certain portion of its yield. Nafi mentioned the amount of the portion but I forgot it. Rafi bin Khadij said, the Prophet forbade renting farms. Narrated Ubaydullah Nafi said, Ibn Umar said, the contract of Khaybar continued, till Umar evacuated the Jews, from Khaybar. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 37, Hadith number 486. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, procrastination, delay, in paying debts by a wealthy man is injustice. So, if your debt is transferred from your debtor to a rich debtor, you should agree. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 37, Hadith number 487. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, procrastination, delay, in paying debts by a wealthy person is injustice. So, if your debt is transferred from your debtor to a rich debtor, you should agree. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 37, Hadith number 488a. Narrated by Salama bin Al-Aqwa, once, while we were sitting in the company of Prophet, a dead man was brought. The Prophet was requested to lead the funeral prayer for the deceased. He said, is he in debt? The people replied in the negative. He said, has he left any wealth? They said, no, so he led his funeral prayer. Another dead man was brought and the people said, O Allah's apostle, lead his funeral prayer. The Prophet said, is he in debt? They said, yes. He said, has he left any wealth? They said, 3 dinars. So, he led the prayer. Then a third dead man was brought and the people said, to the Prophet, please lead his funeral prayer. He said, has he left any wealth? They said, no. He asked, is he in debt? They said, yes. He has to pay 3 dinars. He refused to pray and said, then pray for your dead companion. Abu Qatada said, O Allah's apostle, lead his funeral prayer, and I will pay his debt. So, he led the prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 37, Hadith number 488b. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, an Israeli man asked another Israeli to lend him 1,000 dinars. The second man required witnesses. The former replied, Allah is sufficient as a witness. The second said, I want a surety. The former replied, Allah is sufficient as a surety. The second said, you are right, and lent him the money for a certain period. The debtor went across the sea. When he finished his job, he searched for a conveyance so that he might reach in time for the repayment of the debt, but he could not find any. So, he took a piece of wood and made a hole in it, inserted in it 1,000 dinars and a letter to the lender, and then closed, i.e. sealed, the hole tightly. He took the piece of wood to the sea and said, O Allah! You know well that I took a loan of 1,000 dinars from so and so. He demanded a surety from me, but I told him that Allah's guarantee was sufficient, and he accepted your guarantee. He then asked for a witness, and I told him that Allah was sufficient as a witness, and he accepted you as a witness. No doubt, I tried hard to find a conveyance so that I could pay his money, but could not find, so I hand over this money to you. Saying that, he threw the piece of wood into the sea till it went out far into it, and then he went away. Meanwhile he started searching for a conveyance in order to reach the creditor's country. One day the lender came out of his house to see whether a ship had arrived bringing his money, and all of a sudden he saw the piece of wood in which his money had been deposited. He took it home to use for fire. When he saw it, he found his money and the letter inside it. Shortly after that, the debtor came bringing 1,000 dinars to him and said, By Allah, I had been trying hard to get a boat so that I could bring you your money, but failed to get one before the one I have come by. The lender asked, Have you sent something to me? The debtor replied, I have told you I could not get a boat other than the one I have come by. The lender said, Allah has delivered on your behalf the money you sent in the piece of wood. So, you may keep your 1,000 dinars and depart guided on the right path. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 37, Hadith number 489. Narrated by Said bin Jubair, Ibn Abbas said, in the verse, to everyone we have appointed, mawaliya means ones, heirs, 4.33. And regarding the verse, and those with whom your right hands have made a pledge. Ibn Abbas said, when the emigrants came to the Prophet in Medina, the emigrant would inherit the Ansari while the latter's relatives would not inherit him because of the bond of brotherhood which the Prophet established between them, i.e. the emigrants and the Ansar. When the verse, and to everyone we have appointed heirs, 4.33, was revealed, it cancelled the bond, the pledge, of brotherhood regarding inheritance. Then he said, the verse, to those also to whom your right hands have pledged, remained valid regarding cooperation and mutual advice, while the matter of inheritance was excluded, and it became permissible to assign something in one's testament to the person who had the right of inheriting before. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 37, Hadith number 490. Narrated by Anas, Abdurrahman bin Auf came to us, and Allah's Apostle established a bond of brotherhood between him and Sa'd bin Rabi'a. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 37, Hadith number 491. Narrated by Asim, I heard Anas bin Malik, have you ever heard that the Prophet said, there is no alliance in Islam? He replied, the Prophet made alliance between Quraysh and the Ansar in my house. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 37, Hadith number 492. Narrated by Salama bin Al-Aqwa, a dead person was brought to the Prophet so that he might lead the funeral prayer for him. He asked, is he in debt? When the people replied in the negative, he led the funeral prayer. Another dead person was brought, and he asked, is he in debt? They said, yes. He refused to lead the prayer and said, lead the prayer of your friend. Abu Qatada said, O Allah's Apostle, I undertake to pay his debt. Allah's Apostle then led his funeral prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 37, Hadith number 493. Narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah, once the Prophet said, to me, if the money of Bahrain comes, I will give you a certain amount of it. The Prophet had breathed his last before the money of Bahrain arrived. When the money of Bahrain reached, Abu Bakr announced, whoever was promised by the Prophet should come to us. I went to Abu Bakr and said, the Prophet promised me so and so. Abu Bakr gave me a handful of coins, and when I counted them, they were 500 in number. Abu Bakr then said, take twice the amount you have taken, besides. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 37, Hadith number 494. Narrated by Aisha, wife of the Prophet, since I reached the age when I could remember things, I have seen my parents worshipping according to the right faith of Islam. Not a single day passed but Allah's apostle visited us both in the morning and in the evening. When the Muslims were persecuted, Abu Bakr set out for Ethiopia as an emigrant. When he reached a place called Bark al-Gimad, he met Ibn ad-Dakna, the chief of the Quraysh tribe, who asked Abu Bakr, where are you going? Abu Bakr said, my people have turned me out of the country and I would like to tour the world and worship my Lord. Ibn ad-Dakna said, a man like you will not go out, nor will he be turned out as you help the poor earn their living, keep good relation with your kith and kin, help the disabled, or the dependents, provide guests with food and shelter, and help people during their troubles. I am your protector. So, go back and worship your Lord at your home. Ibn ad-Dakna went along with Abu Bakr and took him to the chiefs of Quraysh, saying to them, a man like Abu Bakr will not go out, nor will he be turned out. Do you turn out a man who helps the poor earn their living, keeps good relations with kith and kin, helps the disabled, provides guests with food and shelter, and helps the people during their troubles? So, Quraysh allowed Ibn ad-Dakna's guarantee of protection and told Abu Bakr that he was secure, and said to Ibn ad-Dakna, advise Abu Bakr to worship his Lord in his house and to pray and read what he liked and not to hurt us and not to do these things publicly, for we fear that our sons and women may follow him. Ibn ad-Dakna told Abu Bakr of all that, so Abu Bakr continued worshipping his Lord in his house and did not pray or recite Quran aloud except in his house. Later on, Abu Bakr had an idea of building a mosque in the courtyard of his house. He fulfilled that idea and started praying and reciting Quran there publicly. The women and the offspring of the pagans started gathering around him and looking at him astonishingly. Abu Bakr was a soft-hearted person and could not help weeping while reciting Quran. This horrified the pagan chiefs of Quraysh. They sent for Ibn ad-Dakna, and when he came, they said, we have given Abu Bakr protection on condition that he will worship his Lord in his house, but he has transgressed that condition and has built a mosque in the courtyard of his house and offered his prayer and recited Quran in public. We are afraid lest he mislead our women and offspring. So, go to him and tell him that if he wishes he can worship his Lord in his house only, and if not, then tell him to return your pledge of protection, as we do not like to betray you by revoking your pledge, nor can we tolerate Abu Bakr's public declaration of Islam, his worshipping. Aisha added, Ibn ad-Dakna came to Abu Bakr and said, you know the conditions on which I gave you protection, so you should either abide by those conditions or revoke my protection, as I do not like to hear the Arabs saying that Ibn ad-Dakna gave the pledge of protection to a person and his people did not respect it. Abu Bakr said, I revoke your pledge of protection and am satisfied with Allah's protection. At that time Allah's apostle was still in Mecca, and he said to his companions, your place of emigration has been shown to me. I have seen salty land, planted with date palms and situated between two mountains which are the two Haras. So, when the Prophet told it, some of the companions migrated to Medina, and some of those who had migrated to Ethiopia returned to Medina. When Abu Bakr prepared for emigration, Allah's apostle said to him, wait, for I expect to be permitted to emigrate. Abu Bakr asked, may my father be sacrificed for your sake, do you really expect that? Allah's apostle replied in the affirmative. So, Abu Bakr postponed his departure in order to accompany Allah's apostle and fed 2 camels which he had, with the leaves of samar trees for 4 months. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 37, Hadith number 495. Narrated by Abu Huraira, whenever a dead man in debt was brought to Allah's apostle he would ask, has he left anything to repay his debt? If he was informed that he had left something to repay his debts, he would offer his funeral prayer, otherwise he would tell the Muslims to offer their friends' funeral prayer. When Allah made the Prophet wealthy through conquests, he said, I am more rightful than other believers to be the guardian of the believers, so if a Muslim dies while in debt, I am responsible for the repayment of his debt, and whoever leaves wealth, after his death, it will belong to his heirs. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 496. Narrated by Ali, Allah's apostle ordered me to distribute the saddles and skins of the budden which had slaughtered. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 497. Narrated by Uqba bin Amir, that the Prophet had given him sheep to distribute among his companions and a male kid was left, after the distribution. When he informed the Prophet of it, he said, to him, offer it as a sacrifice on your behalf. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 498. Narrated by Abdurrahman bin Auf, I got an agreement written between me and Umayyah bin Khalaf that Umayyah would look after my property, or family, in Mecca and I would look after his in Medina. When I mentioned the word Ar-Rahman in the documents, Umayyah said, I do not know Ar-Rahman. Write down to me your name, with which you called yourself, in the pre-Islamic period of ignorance. So, I wrote my name Abdu Amr. On the day of the battle of Badr, when all the people went to sleep, I went up the hill to protect him. Bilal, 1, saw him, i.e. Umayyah, and went to a gathering of Ansar and said, here is Umayyah bin Khalaf. Woe to me if he escapes. So, a group of Ansar went out with Bilal to follow us, Abdurrahman and Umayyah. Being afraid that they would catch us, I left Umayyah's son for them to keep them busy, but the Ansar killed the son and insisted on following us. Umayyah was a fat man, and when they approached us, I told him to kneel down, and he knelt, and I laid myself on him to protect him, but the Ansar killed him by passing their swords underneath me, and one of them injured my foot with his sword. The sub-narrator said, Abdurrahman used to show us the trace of the wound on the back of his foot. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 499. Narrated by Abu Said al-Khudri and Abu Huraira, Allah's apostle employed someone as a governor at Khaybar. When the man came to Medina, he brought with him dates called janab. The Prophet asked him, are all the dates of Khaybar of this kind? The man replied, no, we exchange 2 essays of bad dates for 1 essay of this kind of dates, i.e. janab, or exchange 3 essays for 2. On that, the Prophet said, don't do so, as it is a kind of usury, riba, but sell the dates of inferior quality for money, and then buy janab with the money. The Prophet said the same thing about dates sold by weight. See Hadith number 506. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 500. Narrated by Ibn Kabi bin Malik, from his father, we had some sheep which used to graze at Salah. One of our slave girls saw a sheep dying and she broke a stone and slaughtered the sheep with it. My father said to the people, don't eat it till I ask the Prophet about it, or till I send somebody to ask the Prophet. So, he asked or sent somebody to ask the Prophet, and the Prophet permitted him to eat it. Ubaydullah, a sub-narrator, said, I admire that girl, for though she was a slave girl, she dared to slaughter the sheep. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 501. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet owed somebody a camel of a certain age. When he came to demand it back, the Prophet said, to some people, give him his due. When the people searched for a camel of that age, they found none, but found a camel 1 year older. The Prophet said, "Give it to him." On that, the man remarked, "You have given me my right in full. May Allah give you in full." The Prophet said, "The best amongst you is the one who pays the rights of others generously." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 502. Narrated by Abu Huraira, a man came to the Prophet demanding his debts and behaved rudely. The companions of the Prophet intended to harm him, but Allah's apostle said to them, "Leave him, for the creditor, i.e. owner of a right, has the right to speak." Allah's apostle then said, "Give him a camel of the same age as that of his." The people said, "O Allah's apostle, there is only a camel that is older than his." Allah's apostle said, "Give it to him, for the best amongst you is he who pays the rights of others handsomely." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 503. Narrated by Marwan bin al-Hakam and al-Miswar bin Makrama, when the delegates of the tribe of Hawazin after embracing Islam, came to Allah's apostle, he got up. They appealed to him to return their properties and their captives. Allah's apostle said to them, "The most beloved statement to me is the true one. So, you have the option of restoring your properties or your captives, for I have delayed distributing them." The narrator added, Allah's apostle had been waiting for them for more than 10 days on his return from Taif. When they realized that Allah's apostle would return to them only one of two things, they said, "We choose our captives." So, Allah's apostle got up in the gathering of the Muslims, praised Allah as he deserved, and said, then after, "These brethren of yours have come to you with repentance and I see it proper to return their captives to them. So, whoever amongst you likes to do that as a favor, then he can do it, and whoever of you wants to stick to his share till we pay him from the very first booty which Allah will give us, then he can do so." The people replied, "We agree to give up our shares willingly as a favor for Allah's apostle." Then Allah's apostle said, "We don't know who amongst you has agreed and who hasn't. Go back and your chiefs may tell us your opinion." So, all of them returned and their chiefs discussed the matter with them, and then they, i.e. their chiefs, came to Allah's apostle to tell him that they, i.e. the people, had given up their shares gladly and willingly. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 504. Narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah, I was accompanying the Prophet on a journey and was riding a slow camel that was lagging behind the others. The Prophet passed by me and asked, "Who is this?" I replied, "Jabir bin Abdullah." He asked, "What is the matter, why are you late?" I replied, "I am riding a slow camel." He asked, "Do you have a stick?" I replied in the affirmative. He said, "Give it to me." When I gave it to him, he beat the camel and rebuked it. Then that camel surpassed the others thenceforth. The Prophet said, "Sell it to me." I replied, "It is a gift for you, O Allah's apostle." He said, "Sell it to me. I have bought it for 4 dinars, gold pieces, and you can keep on riding it till Medina." When we approached Medina, I started going towards my house. The Prophet said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I have married a widow." He said, "Why have you not married a virgin to fondle with each other?" I said, "My father died and left daughters, so I decided to marry a widow, an experienced woman, to look after them." He said, "Well done." When we reached Medina, Allah's apostle said, "O Bilal, pay him the price of the camel, and give him extra money." Bilal gave me 4 dinars and 1 kirat extra. A sub-narrator said Jabir added, "The extra kirat of Allah's apostle never parted from me. The kirat was always in Jabir bin Abdullah's purse." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 505a. Narrated by Sal bin Sad, a woman came to Allah's apostle and said, "O Allah's apostle, I want to give up myself to you." A man said, marry her to me. The Prophet said, we agree to marry her to you with what you know of the Quran by heart. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 505b. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle deputed me to keep Sadaqat, al-Fitr, of Ramadan. A comer came and started taking handfuls of the food stuff, of the Sadaqah, stealthily. I took hold of him and said, by Allah, I will take you to Allah's Apostle. He said, I am needy and have many dependents, and I am in great need. I released him, and in the morning Allah's Apostle asked me, what did your prisoner do yesterday? I said, O Allah's Apostle. The person complained of being needy and of having many dependents, so, I pitied him and let him go. Allah's Apostle said, indeed, he told you a lie and he will be coming again. I believed that he would show up again as Allah's Apostle had told me that he would return. So, I waited for him watchfully. When he showed up and started stealing handfuls of food stuff, I caught hold of him again and said, I will definitely take you to Allah's Apostle. He said, leave me, for I am very needy and have many dependents. I promise I will not come back again. I pitied him and let him go. In the morning Allah's Apostle asked me, what did your prisoner do? I replied, O Allah's Apostle. He complained of his great need and of too many dependents, so I took pity on him and set him free. Allah's Apostle said, verily, he told you a lie and he will return. I waited for him attentively for the third time, and when he came and started stealing handfuls of the food stuff, I caught hold of him and said, I will surely take you to Allah's Apostle as it is the third time you promise not to return, yet you break your promise and come. He said, forgive me and I will teach you some words with which Allah will benefit you. I asked, what are they? He replied, whenever you go to bed, recite ayat al-Kursi. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum till you finish the whole verse. If you do so, Allah will appoint a guard for you who will stay with you and no Satan will come near you till morning. So, I released him. In the morning, Allah's Apostle asked, what did your prisoner do yesterday? I replied, he claimed that he would teach me some words by which Allah will benefit me, so I let him go. Allah's Apostle asked, what are they? I replied, he said to me, whenever you go to bed, recite ayat al-Kursi from the beginning to the end. Allahu la ilaha illa huwal hayyul qayyum. He further said to me, if you do so, Allah will appoint a guard for you who will stay with you, and no Satan will come near you till morning. Abu Huraira or another sub-narrator, added that they, the companions, were very keen to do good deeds. The Prophet said, he really spoke the truth, although he is an absolute liar. Do you know whom you were talking to, these 3 nights, O Abu Huraira? Abu Huraira said, no, he said, it was Satan. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 506. Narrated by Abu Said al-Khudri, once Bilal brought barni, i.e. a kind of dates, to the Prophet and the Prophet asked him, from where have you brought these? Bilal replied, I had some inferior type of dates and exchanged 2 sas of it for 1 sa of barni dates in order to give it to the Prophet, to eat. Thereupon the Prophet said, beware. Beware. This is definitely riba, usury. This is definitely riba, usury. Don't do so, but if you want to buy a superior kind of dates, sell the inferior dates for money and then buy the superior kind of dates with that money. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 507. Narrated by Amr, concerning the waqf of Umar, it was not sinful of the trustee, of the waqf, to eat or provide his friends from it, provided the trustee had no intention of collecting fortune, for himself. Ibn Umar was the manager of the trust of Umar and he used to give presents from it to those with whom he used to stay at Mecca. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 508. Narrated by Zayd bin Khalid and Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, O Yunus, go to the wife of this man, and if she confesses that she has committed illegal sexual intercourse, then stone her to death. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 509. Narrated by Uqba bin al-Harith, when a Nu'man or his son was brought in a state of drunkenness, Allah's apostle ordered all those who were present in the house to beat him. I was one of those who beat him. We beat him with shoes and palm leaf stalks. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 510. Narrated by Aisha, I twisted the garlands of the hadis, i.e. animals for sacrifice, of Allah's apostle with my own hands. Then Allah's apostle put them around their necks with his own hands, and sent them with my father, to Mecca. Nothing legal was regarded illegal for Allah's apostle till the animals were slaughtered. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 511. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, Abu Talha was the richest man in Medina amongst the ангիր and biraha, garden, was the most beloved of his property, and it was situated opposite the mosque of the Prophet. Allah's apostle used to enter it and drink from its sweet water. When the following divine verse were revealed, you will not attain righteousness till you spend in charity of the things you love. 3.93, Abu Talha got up in front of Allah's apostle and said, O Allah's apostle, Allah says in his book, you will not attain righteousness unless you spend, in charity, that which you love, and verily, the most beloved to me of my property is biraha, garden, so I give it in charity and hope for its reward from Allah. O Allah's apostle, spend it wherever you like. Allah's apostle appreciated that and said, that is perishable wealth, that is perishable wealth. I have heard what you have said, I suggest you to distribute it among your relatives. Abu Talha said, I will do so, O Allah's apostle. So, Abu Talha distributed it among his relatives and cousins. The sub-narrator, Malik, said, the Prophet said, that is a profitable wealth, instead of perishable wealth. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 38, Hadith number 512. Narrated by Abu Musa, the Prophet said, an honest treasurer who gives what he is ordered to give fully, perfectly, and willingly to the person to whom he is ordered to give, is regarded as one of the two charitable persons. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 513. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, Allah's apostle said, there is none amongst the Muslims who plants a tree or sows seeds, and then a bird, or a person or an animal eats from it, but is regarded as a charitable gift for him. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 514. Narrated by Abu Umama al-Bahili, I saw some agricultural equipments and said, I heard the Prophet saying, there is no house in which these equipment enters except that Allah will cause humiliation to enter it. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 515. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's apostle said, whoever keeps a dog, 1 qirat of the reward of his good deeds is deducted daily, unless the dog is used for guarding a farm or cattle. Abu Huraira, in another narration, said from the Prophet, unless it is used for guarding sheep or farms, or for hunting. Narrated Abu Hazim from Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, a dog for guarding cattle or for hunting. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 516. Narrated by As-Saib bin Yazid, Abu Sufyan bin Abu Zuhair, a man from Aist and one of the companions of the Prophet said, I heard Allah's apostle saying, if one keeps a dog which is meant for guarding neither a farm nor cattle, 1 qirat of the reward of his good deeds is deducted daily. I said, did you hear this from Allah's apostle? He said, yes, by the Lord of this mosque. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 517. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, while a man was riding a cow, it turned towards him and said, I have not been created for this purpose, i.e. carrying, I have been created for sloughing. The Prophet added, I, Abu Bakr and Umar believe in the story. The Prophet went on, a wolf caught a sheep, and when the shepherd chased it, the wolf said, who will be its guard on the day of wild beasts, when there will be no shepherd for it except me? After narrating it, the Prophet said, I, Abu Bakr and Umar too believe it. Abu Salama, a sub-narrator, said, Abu Bakr and Umar were not present then. It has been written that a wolf also spoke to one of the companions of the Prophet near Medina as narrated in Fatah al-Bari. Narrated Yunus ben Amr, Aban ben Aus said, I was amongst my sheep. Suddenly a wolf caught a sheep and I shouted at it. The wolf sat on its tail and addressed me, saying, who will look after it, i.e. the sheep, when you will be busy and not able to look after it? Do you forbid me the provision which Allah has provided me? Aban added, I clapped my hands and said, by Allah, I have never seen anything more curious and wonderful than this. On that the wolf said, there is something more curious and wonderful than this, that is, Allah's apostle in those palm trees, inviting people to Allah, i.e. Islam. Yunus ben Amr further said, then Aban went to Allah's apostle and informed him what happened and embraced Islam, palm trees or other trees, and share the fruits with me. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 518. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the ангիր said to the Prophet, distribute the date palm trees between us and our emigrant brothers. He replied, no. The ангիր said, to the emigrants, look after the trees, water and watch them, and share the fruits with us. The emigrants said, we listen and obey. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 519. Narrated by Abdullah, the Prophet got the date palm trees of the tribe of Bani Nadir burnt and the trees cut down at a place called Al-Buwaira. Hassan bin Thabit said in a poetic verse, the chiefs of Bani Lu'ay found it easy to watch fire spreading at Al-Buwaira. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 520. Narrated by Rafi bin Khadij, we worked on farms more than anybody else in Medina. We used to rent the land at the yield of specific delimited portion of it to be given to the landlord. Sometimes the vegetation of that portion was affected by blights etc., while the rest remained safe and vice versa, so the Prophet forbade this practice. At that time gold or silver were not used, for renting the land. If they provided the seeds, they would get so and so much. Al-Hasan said, there is no harm if the land belongs to one but both spend on it and the yield is divided between them. Az-Zuri had the same opinion. Al-Hasan said, there is no harm if cotton is picked on the condition of having half the yield. Ibrahim, Ibn Shayn, Atta, Al-Hakam, Az-Zuri, and Qatada said, there is no harm in giving the yarn to the weaver to weave into cloth on the basis that 1/3 or 1/4, or any other portion, of the cloth is given to the weaver for his labor. Mam said, there is no harm in hiring animals for a definite, fixed, period on the basis that 1/3 or 1/4 of the products carried by the animals is given to the owner of the animals. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 521. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, the Prophet concluded a contract with the people of Khaybar to utilize the land on the condition that half the products of fruits or vegetation would be their share. The Prophet used to give his wives 100 wasks each, 80 wasks of dates and 20 wasks of barley. When Umar became the caliph, he gave the wives of the Prophet the option of either having the land and water as their shares, or carrying on the previous practice. Some of them chose the land and some chose the wasks, and Aisha chose the land. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 522. Narrated by Ibn Umar, the Prophet made a deal with the people of Khaybar that they would have half the fruits and vegetation of the land they cultivated. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 523. Narrated by Amr, I said to Taus, I wish you would give up mukabara, sharecropping, for the people say that the Prophet forbade it. On that Taus replied, O Amr, I give the land to sharecroppers and help them. No doubt, the most learned man, namely Ibn Abbas, told me that the Prophet had not forbidden it but said, it is more beneficial for one to give his land free to one's brother than to charge him a fixed rental. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 524. Narrated by Ibn Umar, Allah's Apostle gave the land of Khaybar to the Jews on the condition that they work on it and cultivate it, and be given half of its yield. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 525. Narrated by Rafi, we worked on farms more than anybody else in Medina. We used to rent the land and say to the owner, the yield of this portion is for us and the yield of that portion is for you, as the rent. One of those portions might yield something and the other might not. So, the Prophet forbade us to do so. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 526. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, the Prophet said, while three men were walking, it started raining and they took shelter, refuge, in a cave in a mountain. A big rock rolled down from the mountain and closed the mouth of the cave. They said to each other, think of good deeds, which you did for Allah's sake only, and invoke Allah by giving reference to those deeds so that He may remove this rock from you. One of them said, O Allah! I had old parents and small children and I used to graze the sheep for them. On my return to them in the evening, I used to milk the sheep, and start providing my parents first of all before my children. One day I was delayed and came late at night and found my parents sleeping. I milked the sheep, as usual, and stood by their heads. I hated to wake them up and disliked to give milk to my children before them, although my children were weeping, because of hunger, at my feet till the day dawned. O Allah! If I did this for your sake only, kindly remove the rock so that we could see the sky through it. So, Allah removed the rock a little and they saw the sky. The second man said, O Allah! I was in love with a cousin of mine like the deepest love a man may have for a woman. I wanted to outrage her chastity but she refused unless I gave her 100 dinars. So, I struggled to collect that amount. And when I sat between her legs, she said, O Allah's slave! Be afraid of Allah and do not deflower me except rightfully, by marriage. So, I got up. O Allah! If I did it for your sake only, please remove the rock. The rock shifted a little more. Then the third man said, O Allah! I employed a laborer for a farak of rice and when he finished his job and demanded his right, I presented it to him, but he refused to take it. So, I sowed the rice many times till I gathered cows and their shepherd, from the yield. Then after some time, he came and said to me, fear Allah, and give me my right. I said, go and take those cows and the shepherd. He said, be afraid of Allah. Don't mock at me. I said, I am not mocking at you. Take all that. So, he took all that. O Allah! If I did that for your sake only, please remove the rest of the rock. So, Allah removed the rock. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 527. Narrated by Zayd bin Aslam, from his father. Umar said, but for the future Muslim generations, I would have distributed the land of the villages I conquer among the soldiers as the Prophet distributed the land of Khaybar. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 528. Narrated by Aisha, the Prophet said, he who cultivates land that does not belong to anybody is more rightful, to own it. Urway said, Umar gave the same verdict in his caliphate. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 529. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, while the Prophet was passing the night at his place of rest in Dhul Hulayfa in the bottom of the valley of Akik, he saw a dream and it was said to him, you are in a blessed valley. Musa said, Salim, let our camels kneel at the place where Abdullah used to make his camel kneel. seeking the place where Allah's apostle used to take a rest, which is situated below the mosque which is in the bottom of the valley, it is midway between the mosque and the road. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 530. Narrated by Umar, while the Prophet was in Al-Hawaala he said, someone, meaning Gabriel, came to me from my Lord tonight, in my dream, and said, offer the prayer in this blessed valley and say, I intend to perform Umrah along with Hajj, together. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 531. Narrated by Ibn Umar, Umar expelled the Jews and the Christians from Hijaz. When Allah's apostle had conquered Khaybar, he wanted to expel the Jews from it as its land became the property of Allah, his apostle, and the Muslims. Allah's apostle intended to expel the Jews, but they requested him to let them stay there on the condition that they would do the labor and get half of the fruits. Allah's apostle told them, we will let you stay on this condition, as long as we wish. So, they, i.e. Jews, kept on living there until Umar forced them to go towards Tama and Ariha. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 532. Narrated by Rafi bin Khadij, my uncle Zuhair said, Allah's apostle forbade us to do a thing which was a source of help to us. I said, whatever Allah's apostle said was right. He said, Allah's apostle sent for me and asked, what are you doing with your farms? I replied, we give our farms on rent on the basis that we get the yield produced at the banks of the water streams, rivers, for the rent, or rent it for some wasks of barley and dates. Allah's apostle said, do not do so, but cultivate the land yourselves, or let it be cultivated by others gratis, or keep it uncultivated. I said, we hear and obey. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 533. Narrated by Jabir, the people used to rent their land for cultivation for 1/3, 1/4, or half its yield. The Prophet said, whoever has land should cultivate it himself or give it to his Muslim brother gratis, otherwise keep it uncultivated. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's apostle said, whoever has land should cultivate it himself or give it to his Muslim brother gratis, otherwise he should keep it uncultivated. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 534. Narrated by Amr, when I mentioned it, i.e. the narration of Rafi bin Khadij, number 532, to Taus, he said, it is permissible to rent the land for cultivation, for Ibn Abbas said, the Prophet did not forbid that, but said, one had better give the land to one's brother gratis rather than charge a certain amount for it. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 535. Narrated by Nafi, Ibn Umar used to rent his farms in the time of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and in the early days of Muawiyah. Then he was told the narration of Rafi bin Khadij that the Prophet had forbidden the renting of farms. Ibn Umar went to Rafi and I accompanied him. He asked Rafi, who replied that the Prophet had forbidden the renting of farms. Ibn Umar said, you know that we used to rent our farms in the lifetime of Allah's apostle for the yield of the banks of the water streams, rivers, and for certain amount of figs. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 536. Narrated by Salim, Abdullah bin Umar said, I knew that the land was rented for cultivation in the lifetime of Allah's apostle. Later on Ibn Umar was afraid that the Prophet had forbidden it, and he had no knowledge of it, so he gave up renting his land. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 537. Narrated by Hanzala bin Qais, Rafi bin Khadij said, my two uncles told me that they, i.e. the companions of the Prophet, used to rent the land in the lifetime of the Prophet for the yield on the banks of water streams, rivers, or for a portion of the yield stipulated by the owner of the land. The Prophet forbade it. I said to Rafi, what about renting the land for dinars and dirhams? He replied, there is no harm in renting for dinars dirhams. Al-Layth said, If those who have discernment for distinguishing what is legal from what is illegal looked into what has been forbidden concerning this matter, they would not permit it, for it is surrounded with dangers. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 538. Narrated by Abu Huraira, once the Prophet was narrating a story, while a Bedouin was sitting with him. One of the inhabitants of paradise will ask Allah to allow him to cultivate the land. Allah will ask him, "Are you not living in the pleasures you like?" He will say, "Yes, but I like to cultivate the land." The Prophet added, "When the man will be permitted, he will sow the seeds and the plants will grow up and get ripe, ready for reaping, and so until it will be as huge as mountains within a wink. Allah will then say to him, 'O son of Adam, take, here you are, gather the yield, nothing satisfies you.'" On that, the Bedouin said, "The man must be either from Quraysh, i.e. an emigrant, or an Ansari, for they are farmers, whereas we are not farmers." The Prophet smiled at this. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 539. Narrated by Sal bin Sad, "We used to be very happy on Friday as an old lady used to cut some roots of the silk, which we used to plant on the banks of our small water streams, and cook them in a pot of hers, adding to them some grains of barley." Yaqub, the sub-narrator, said, "I think the narrator mentioned that the food did not contain fat or melted fat, taken from meat. When we offered the Friday prayer, we would go to her and she would serve us with the dish. So, we used to be happy on Fridays because of that. We used not to take our meals or the midday nap except after the Jumu'ah prayer, i.e. Friday prayer." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 39, Hadith number 540. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the people say that Abu Huraira narrates too many narrations. In fact, Allah knows whether I say the truth or not. They also ask, why do the emigrants and the Ansar not narrate as he does? In fact, my emigrant brethren were busy trading in the markets, and my Ansar brethren were busy with their properties. I was a poor man keeping the company of Allah's apostle and was satisfied with what filled my stomach. So, I used to be present while they, i.e. the emigrants and the Ansar, were absent, and I used to remember while they forgot." The Hadith. One day the Prophet said, "Whoever spreads his sheet till I finish the statement of mine and then gathers it on his chest, will never forget anything of my statement." So, I spread my covering sheet, which was the only garment I had, till the Prophet finished his statement, and then I gathered it over my chest. By him who had sent him, i.e. Allah's apostle, with the truth, since then I did not forget even a single word of that statement of his, until this day of mine. By Allah, but for 2 verses in Allah's book, I would never have related any narration from the Prophet. These 2 verses are verily those who conceal the clear signs and the guidance which we have sent down up to the merciful. 2.159 to 160.